In June of 1975, a young British aristocrat watched his Formula One team beat Ferrari. Not a backmarker, the reigning points leader, Niki Lauda, in the fastest car on the grid. And the team that beat him drank champagne for breakfast, kept a butler in the pit lane, and built its race car inside a horse stable. Every established team in Formula One thought they were a joke. This is the story of the Hesketh 308, the party team that beat the factory giant nobody else could touch and then disappeared almost overnight. To understand how absurd this win was, you have to understand who these people were. Hesketh racing did not come from the world of professional motorsport. It came from a society wedding, a personal fortune, and a young lord who wanted something to do at the weekends. They had no sponsors, no factory, and no reason anyone should have taken them seriously. What they had instead was money, nerve, and a sense of humour. And somewhere underneath all the champagne, they had a genuinely brilliant engineer. Here is how the biggest little team in Formula One came together and how it pulled off one of the greatest upsets the sport has ever seen. Number 10. It started at a wedding. In the early 1970s, a young aristocrat named Lord Alexander Hesketh met a friend called Anthony Horsley, known to absolutely everyone as Bubbles. Hesketh was the third Baron Hesketh, barely into his 20s, and he had inherited Easton Neston, a vast stately home near Towcester in Northamptonshire, sitting on its own sprawling country estate. The house had been designed in 1702 by the architect Nicholas Hawksmoor. This was not a man who needed a job. He needed a hobby. Bubbles Horsley suggested motor racing and suggested that Hesketh pay for it. So that is exactly what they did. They started with a small Formula 3 operation in 1972, then climbed to Formula 2, and the whole thing was financed out of one man's personal bank account, with no commercial backers and no board of directors to answer to. Just a lord, his friend, and a growing obsession that was climbing the motorsport ladder faster than anyone expected. Hesketh gave himself the nickname Le Patron, French for the boss, and he meant it. He ran the team the way he ran his parties, with enormous confidence and very little interest in what anyone else thought. The rest of Formula One looked at this and assumed it was a rich kid playing at racing. They were half right. He was a rich kid, but he was about to embarrass all of them. Number 9. They hired a driver nobody else wanted. James Hunt was fast, fearless, and a walking disaster. He crashed so often in the junior categories that the paddock gave him a nickname that stuck for years: Hunt the Shunt. The March team had pushed him out for being too wild. Other team owners saw a liability. Hesketh saw a kindred spirit. The two of them fit together perfectly. A reckless young driver and a reckless young lord, both convinced they belonged at the top, and both treated as outsiders by the people already there. The contract that bound them together was not drawn up by lawyers. According to Hesketh, they signed the only deal they ever made on the back of a beer mat in a cafe in Belgium. He was always rather proud of that. In 1973, Hesketh rented a March 731 chassis and put Hunt in it for the team's first real Formula One season. Everyone expected them to fail quietly and go home. Instead, Hunt finished 6th in only his second Grand Prix, then 4th in Britain, then 3rd in Holland for his first podium, and capped the year with a stunning 2nd place at the United States Grand Prix, chasing Ronnie Peterson all the way to the line. The reject was quick, and the joke team had just scored a string of results that proper outfits would have been happy with. Number 8. They turned Formula One into a party on purpose. While other teams arrived at the track in plain transporters and grey overalls, Hesketh arrived like visiting royalty. It was less a racing team and more a travelling house party that happened to enter a car. There were butlers handing out champagne at 7 in the morning. There was a Rolls-Royce Corniche and a Porsche as runabouts. At the Monaco Grand Prix, the team relaxed offshore on a chartered yacht more than 160 feet long, stocked with champagne and good company. Hesketh wandered the paddock in a bespoke white suit. And while all of this was going on, James Hunt would often be quietly throwing up from nerves before the race. The team mascot was a cartoon teddy bear, and it ended up on the cars, the transporters, and the team shirts. To this day, a lot of fans will tell you it is the best logo in the history of the sport. The detail that drove the establishment mad was the sponsorship, or rather the complete absence of it. Every other team plastered their cars in cigarette and oil money. Hesketh ran a clean white car with no commercial backing at all, simply because he could afford to and because he thought it looked better. It was the ultimate flex. "We are here for fun," the car seemed to say, "and we are still going to beat you." The other teams laughed. They would not be laughing for long. Number 7. The secret weapon was a doctor they got drunk. Behind all the champagne and showmanship, Hesketh understood one thing clearly. You could not win in Formula One on attitude alone. You needed a real engineer. So he went after one of the brightest young designers around, Dr. Harvey Postlethwaite, who was working at March. The recruitment process was very Hesketh. They took Postlethwaite to lunch, poured 2 bottles of fine white burgundy into him, and by the time the meal was over, he had agreed to join. Postlethwaite later joked that he only signed up in a moment of weakness. Bubbles put it more bluntly and said they got him completely drunk, and that it turned out to be brilliant for everyone because it launched the doctor's career. This was the part the rest of the grid did not see coming. They saw the parties. They did not see that Hesketh had quietly hired one of the most inventive engineering minds of the decade. Postlethwaite was not there to make up the numbers. He was there to build a car that could win, and he was good enough to do it. The Playboys had a genius hiding in the back room, and that genius was about to design something nobody expected from a team that drank champagne for breakfast. Number 6. They built a Formula One car inside a horse stable. When Hesketh decided to stop renting cars and build his own, he did not rent a factory. He converted the stable block at Easton Neston, the same stables that had stood since 1702, into a racing workshop. That is where the first true Hesketh car took shape. The team gave it a name and a number, the Hesketh 308, and it was powered by the Ford Cosworth DFV, the V8 engine that nearly every privateer team relied on. There was an even bolder idea on the table first. Hesketh and Postlethwaite seriously considered building their own engine, a V12, in-house. At the time, only a handful of teams, names like Ferrari and BRM, built their own engines. For a team racing out of a converted stable to even think about it tells you how much ambition was hiding behind the jokes. In the end, they chose the sensible path and went with the proven Cosworth. The car itself was clever. It had a narrow, shallow body that widened out toward the rear. It was light, it was neat, and it was quick. The thing that the establishment never managed to get its head around was simple. This beautifully engineered machine, capable of running with the best in the world, had been screwed together in a building that used to house horses, and the man paying for it would not put a single sponsor sticker on it. Number 5. The party team invented something genuinely new. Postlethwaite was not content to copy what everyone else was doing. He wanted a lighter, simpler springing system for the car, and he found inspiration in a strange place. A friend of his worked on rubber damping for buildings in earthquake zones, the kind of flexible mounting that lets a structure absorb a violent shock without falling apart. Postlethwaite took that idea and applied it to a racing car, replacing conventional metal springs with rubber ones. The first attempt in 1974 did not work. the rubber kept deforming. So a special non-creep rubber was developed with help from the Malaysian Rubber Producers Association, formed into springs by a specialist company, and fitted to the car from the start of the 1975 season. Think about what that means. A team that the rest of the grid dismissed as rich amateurs was running an original suspension idea borrowed from earthquake engineering, while the so-called serious teams stuck to convention. This is the detail that should put the lazy story to rest. Hesketh Racing was not a bunch of toffs who got lucky. There was real innovation under that white bodywork. The champagne was real, but so was the engineering. And in 1975, all of that quiet cleverness was about to come together at exactly the right moment, on exactly the right afternoon. If you are enjoying this one, take a second to subscribe. This channel is all about the forgotten machines and the underdog stories from the golden age of motor racing, and I go through the comments on every video, so tell me which team you want covered next. Now, back to 1975. Number 4, they beat the real teams before anyone was ready for it. In the spring of 1974, the new Hesketh 308 had only been racing for a few weekends. Its first championship outings were rough. Then came the Daily Express International Trophy at Silverstone, a non-championship race, but one that drew the top Formula One teams and drivers. Hunt started from pole, but a clutch problem dropped him to the back of the field on the opening lap. What followed was the drive that changed how people saw him. He carved his way back through the pack, and on lap 27th, he pulled off a breathtaking move on Ronnie Peterson, one of the fastest men in the world at Woodcote, a corner taken at around 170 miles per hour. He took the lead and he took the win. It did not count toward the championship. It did not matter. The points had been made in front of the entire paddock. The kid nobody wanted in a car built in a stable by a team that drank champagne for breakfast had just outraced the establishment on their own home ground. The laughter started to die down after that. The grudging respect started to creep in, and the best was still a full season away. Number 3, Ferrari tried to pull them in. Here is how seriously the establishment started to take this so-called joke team. Enzo Ferrari himself, the commendatore, the founder of the most famous name in the sport, invited Lord Hesketh down to Maranello. According to Hesketh, Ferrari offered him engines. Think about the turnaround. The same Formula One world that had written these people off as party-loving amateurs now had its most legendary figure trying to bring them into the fold. Hesketh also claimed his team was spending more time in the wind tunnel than almost anyone else on the grid, chasing aerodynamic gains while their reputation said they were chasing nothing but a good time. Whether or not every detail of those stories is perfect, the direction of travel is clear. In barely 2 years, Hesketh Racing had gone from a punchline to a team that Ferrari wanted a relationship with. That does not happen by accident, and it does not happen to a team that is only there for the parties. It happens when you start frightening people, and by 1975, with a refined car, a maturing driver, and a clever engineer, Hesketh was about to frighten the entire grid. They just needed the right race to prove it once and for all. Number 2. In 1975, they finally became a real threat, and it still was not enough to save them. This was the high point. The car was now the developed 308B, the rubber suspension was working, and Hunt was driving with new maturity. He opened the year with a fighting second place in Argentina, behind only Emerson Fittipaldi's McLaren. He added 2 more second places later on in France and in Austria. He was no longer the crash-prone wild man. He was a genuine front-runner, mixing it with the very best drivers in the world week after week. By the end of the year, both Hunt and the team would finish 4th in the World Championship, a remarkable result for a privately funded outfit with no sponsorship. But here is the cruel part. Every one of those strong results cost money, and the money was only flowing in one direction, out of Lord Hesketh's own pocket. Running a competitive Formula One team out of a personal fortune with no sponsors by choice was never going to last forever. The better they got, the more expensive it became, and unlike Ferrari or McLaren, there was no manufacturer and no sponsor check arriving to share the load. It all came from one family fortune, and even great fortunes have a bottom. The clock was ticking on the whole adventure even as the car got faster, and before that clock ran out, this team and this driver had one perfect afternoon waiting for them. One race that would make all of it worth it. Number 1. Zandvoort, the 22nd of June, 1975. This is the day the party team beat Ferrari. The Dutch Grand Prix should have been simple for the red cars. Niki Lauda arrived as the championship leader on a run of 3 straight wins in the Ferrari 312T, the class of the field. He and his teammate Clay Regazzoni locked out the front row in qualifying. Hunt put the Hesketh third on the grid, a few tenths back, the best of everyone who was not a Ferrari. Then the weather did him a favour. Race day was wet. Heavy rain soaked the circuit, the start was delayed, and most teams set their cars up for the wet. Hunt and Bubbles Horsley made a gamble. They set the car up for a dry track, betting the rain would clear. When the race began, Lauda led and the conditions were treacherous, but the sky brightened. A dry line appeared, and Hunt dived into the pits early to bolt on slick tyres, while others hesitated. It was exactly the right call at exactly the right moment. He came back out, took the lead, and then faced the hardest test of his career. Niki Lauda, in the fastest car on the grid, hunted him down for more than 30 laps. The Ferrari was quicker in a straight line. One mistake from Hunt, the kind of mistake he had made so many times before, and it would be over. The mistake never came. Hunt drove a flawless race, defending the inside line into the first corner lap after lap, soaking up everything Lauda could throw at him, and he took the flag a little over 1 second ahead of the Ferrari. The party team had beaten the factory giant. It was Hunt's first Formula One victory, and it would be the only Grand Prix Hesketh Racing ever won. And then came the ending nobody wanted. The money had finally run out. At the end of 1975, with no sponsor to save it, Lord Hesketh withdrew his support, and the team that everyone had laughed at, the team that beat Ferrari fair and square, quietly folded. James Hunt walked straight into a vacant seat at McLaren, which had only opened up because Emerson Fittipaldi unexpectedly left to join his brother's team. 1 year later, in 1976, Hunt was Formula One world champion, beating Niki Lauda to the title by a single point in one of the closest and most dramatic seasons the sport has ever seen. The team that made him had already folded by then. The party was over, but the legend was just beginning. That is the story of the Hesketh 308. A car built in a horse stable, run by a lord who drank champagne for breakfast, driven by a man everyone had given up on. They were treated as a joke by a sport that took itself very seriously, and on one wet afternoon in Holland, they beat the best team and the best driver on the planet. They only won once. They did not need to win twice. The story was already perfect. If you love these forgotten underdog stories from the golden years of motor racing, subscribe and stick around, because there are plenty more machines and mavericks I want to dig up for you. I will see you in the next one.